Imagine you're a caveman. It's thundering, lightning is striking, and your cousin just got eaten by a saber-tooth. What do? Naturally, you assume the sky is angry. Boom, religion is born. Before temples, before Bibles, gods had no buildings, just spooky caves and wide-eyed hunter-gatherers. Early humans practiced animism, the idea that everything, trees, rivers, animals, even the wind, had a spirit. We buried our dead with tools and food, suggesting we believed in an afterlife. Probably because life back then was so hard that the afterlife sounded like a vacation. The tribe's go-to spiritual expert? The shaman. Part healer, part mystic, part guy who eats the weird mushrooms and talks to rocks. Then came civilization, and religion leveled up. In ancient Egypt, the gods were everywhere. Jackals, falcons, crocodiles. The pharaoh was a living god, which made raising taxes a whole lot easier. Mesopotamia had gods who were mostly just angry all the time. Floods, droughts, wars, all divine punishment, obviously. Religion wasn't just faith, it was insurance. Sacrifice to the gods or risk getting smited. In the Indus Valley, early forms of Hinduism began to form. Complex rituals, spiritual texts, and a whole cast of gods and avatars. Over time, Hinduism evolved into one of the most ancient and enduring religions, with ideas like karma, reincarnation, and divine cows. Buddhism spun off from Hinduism thanks to a sheltered prince named Siddhartha Gautama. He saw suffering, had an existential crisis, and ended up inventing meditation. Today, over 500 million people follow his teachings about detachment, mindfulness, and not being a jerk. In China, Confucianism wasn't exactly a religion, more like a rule book for being a decent citizen. It emphasized respect, family, and knowing your place in the social hierarchy. Taoism, by contrast, told people to go with the flow and stop trying so hard. Very chill. Meanwhile, in the Americas, the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas were building temples, performing blood sacrifices, and tracking celestial events with insane precision. Their gods were demanding, and their rituals were, let's say, dramatic. In the Middle East, Judaism emerged with a radical idea: one God, not dozens. This God wasn't tied to a mountain or a river. He had rules, a lot of rules. But he also had a covenant, a relationship with his people. That idea would change everything. From Judaism came Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth preached love, humility, and mercy, and got executed for it. But his followers believed he rose from the dead, and that belief spread like wildfire. Within a few centuries, the Roman Empire went from persecuting Christians to making Christianity the state religion. Christianity grew fast, helped by emperors, popes, missionaries, and some very expensive cathedrals. It splintered into dozens of branches, launched crusades, inspired art, and sometimes got a little too cozy with power. Then came Islam. In the 7th century, the Prophet Muhammad received revelations that became the Quran. Islam emphasized monotheism, charity, prayer, and unity. It spread across the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia through trade, diplomacy, and military conquest. Within a century, Islam ruled an empire larger than Rome ever did. The Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam became the dominant faiths across much of the world. But religion wasn't just about belief. It was about politics, law, identity, and sometimes power. Now, let's rewind to the 1500s and the invention of the printing press. This changed everything. A German monk named Martin Luther got fed up with the Catholic Church selling forgiveness like a car warranty. He nailed 95 theses to a church door, sparking the Protestant Reformation. Suddenly, people could read the Bible in their own language. New denominations exploded across Europe. The printing press supercharged Christianity's spread. Protestant ideas zipped across Europe faster than the church could ban them. Meanwhile, in much of the Islamic world, printing religious texts was restricted. Leaders feared it would lead to heresy and chaos. And so, for centuries, Islam's message spread more slowly, not because it was less compelling, but because it couldn't be mass-produced. But before we get to modern religion, we need to talk about a turning point, the French Revolution, the moment when Europe finally said, hey, maybe the king isn't God's favorite. For centuries, governments in Europe were deeply tied to religion through the idea of divine right, basically the medieval version of God said I could, so I did. The divine right of kings was the belief that monarchs were chosen by God himself to rule, not elected, not appointed, not hired, divinely handpicked. The king was seen as God's representative on earth. To go against the king was not just rebellion, it was blasphemy. Where did this idea come from? It built on centuries of religious tradition, especially Christianity. Rulers would point to Bible verses like Romans 13, which says that all authority comes from God, as proof that their rule was sacred and unquestionable. The church backed it up too, because if kings got their power from God, the church could play kingmaker. Popes crowned emperors and decided who got to wear the shiny hat. The system worked for kings and bishops anyway. It gave monarchs absolute authority and made religion a tool of state control. The laws weren't just political. They were moral, divinely sanctioned, and eternal. Even criticizing the monarchy could get you arrested or excommunicated. Kings like Louis XIV of France took it to the max. He literally said, "L'État, c'est moi. I am the state." Not exactly humble, but it worked, until people realized, wait, maybe God didn't actually approve of all these taxes and wars. So in the late 1700s, France exploded into revolutionary chaos. Bread was expensive, inequality was rampant, and the people were sick of the monarchy and the church living in luxury while everyone else starved. They chopped off the king's head, declared religion a tool of oppression, and launched a full-on campaign of de-Christianization. Churches were looted, priests were exiled, religious holidays were replaced with festivals honoring reason and liberty. They even tried to introduce a new calendar, because if you're going to rebel against the system, why stop at months? This was more than just a rebellion. It was a philosophical shift. Instead of ruling by divine right, governments started claiming legitimacy through the nation, the people, and later, the Constitution. Power no longer flowed down from heaven. It was supposed to rise up from the citizens. This change swept across Europe. The idea of nationalism, loyalty to your country, not your church, gained traction. And even though religion still played a role in many governments, it was no longer the unquestioned foundation. This shift had huge effects on religion. In some places, religion became privatized, more about personal faith than political power. In others, churches had to adapt, compromise, or risk becoming irrelevant. It also opened the door for secularism, religious freedom, and pluralism, ideas now baked into many modern democracies. Of course, some governments responded by doubling down on religion, but the genie was out of the bottle. Once people saw that you could run a society without giving all the power to priests and kings, religion had to evolve. Today, religion is complicated. It gives people hope, meaning, community, and identity. It also gives us televangelists begging for jet money, political scandals, and more religious debates in comment sections than in actual temples. Christianity remains the largest religion, but it's fragmented. Some churches are huge and powerful, others are tiny and struggling. And throughout history, Christianity has often struggled to resist the temptation of political power, sometimes becoming more empire than church. Islam is growing, but mostly because of birth rates, not conversion. Countries like Nigeria, Pakistan, and Indonesia have high population growth, which fuels Islam's demographic rise. But in terms of spreading to new regions, not much is happening. In the East, religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism are stable, but many are supported or enforced by government structures. In China, religion is allowed, but only if it doesn't challenge authority. And that brings us to one of the weirdest modern twists in the history of religion, the rise of state-enforced personality cults. In North Korea, the Kim dynasty turned nationalism into theology. Kim Il-sung is the eternal president even though he's dead. His son, Kim Jong-il, is revered like a demigod. And Kim Jong-un, divine leader with a weird haircut. Their ideology, Juche, is a mix of socialism, nationalism, and forced worship. North Korea's religion is now the 10th largest in the world. Not because people believe it, but because they don't have a choice. In Albania, under Enver Hoxha, religion was banned entirely. Churches, mosques, and temples were shut down. The only belief system allowed was loyalty to the state and to Hoxha himself. Similar things happened in Eritrea, where the government heavily controls religion, arrests religious leaders, and tightly monitors worship. So what's the future of religion? Islam is expected to grow the most, especially in Africa and Asia. Christianity will also grow, especially in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa, largely through evangelical and Pentecostal movements. Hinduism and Buddhism will grow slowly, mostly in their traditional homelands. The number of nuns, people with no religious affiliation, is skyrocketing in the West. More and more people say they're spiritual but not religious, or just not interested at all. Every religion faces challenges. Christianity must deal with its history of institutional abuse and political entanglement. Islam must contend with modernization and internal reform. Eastern religions must adapt to changing values in younger generations. And state religions, like Juche in North Korea, depend entirely on the survival of authoritarian systems. But every religion also has strengths. They offer structure, purpose, community, rituals, and narratives that people find deeply meaningful. As long as humans ask big questions about life, death, purpose, and meaning, religion will be there, evolving, adapting, and occasionally arguing with itself. So whether you're meditating, praying, fasting, or just hoping your Wi-Fi holds up during a storm, remember, religion has been with us since we first looked at the sky and wondered who was throwing all that lightning. And it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Smash that like button, subscribe for more brain fuel, and comment before the Wi-Fi gods smite us all.